What's up, everybody? It's Tony with Alternative Living Spaces. And on this episode, we're gonna be deep diving into plumbing. Gonna be breaking down to you exactly how we do it, especially in this unique build that we're in where the interior walls are not very thick. So a lot of interesting details to go over on this, and you're gonna wanna stay to the very end where I have a free gift for you. Now, when it comes to plumbing, there's different options for what you can use for your water lines. Some people will use copper lines. The easiest thing for us to use is PEX lines, and we're really happy with how they've been working for us. So you can see right here, we got some cold PEX lines. Down here, you got the hot water PEX lines. And I'm gonna walk you through the initial stages of how this works. Let's check this out. Now, what's unique about this build in particular is it's actually a 2-story container home. So it's a 40-foot container on the bottom and a 20-foot container up top. That means we have to navigate how is the water gonna get into this main unit and then get into the upper unit. Now, we build everything modularly. If you were building this on site, you could just run your water line straight up through the rooftop potentially. But because of the way that we're doing our construction, we want these to then get married on site with very simple connections. Because of that, we have our hot and cold lines that come into this main container. They're then gonna run up through the ceiling out the top of this 40-foot container. And on our 20-foot container on the bottom top end, we'll have another hot and cold inlet. So on site, all they gotta do is do a simple connection from hot to hot and from cold to cold. Now this hot and cold line, when it entered into our unit, it really just entered in with one main water line. That main water line that's on site will get connected to our main inlet on our container. From there, it's gonna go to your water heater, and it's at that point that you're now gonna have your hot water lines, the red PEX. Now those cold and those hot water lines, from there will then run to each of your main fixtures. So in this unit, we have a kitchen sink that's gonna need a hot and cold water line. We have a bathroom sink that needs a hot and cold water line. We have a toilet that'll just need a water line, or a cold water line. And then we have the shower that needs a hot and a cold water line. You're gonna run your water lines to each of those, properly connect them, and then ultimately get them connected to your fixtures. Now, I wanna point out a couple things about the way that we're doing the plumbing on this. First off, these lines are inset into the wall. Part of the reason for that is you don't want someone to accidentally screw in to your water lines. That would be devastating. So you want to have those properly inset so that any screws can't hit them. Another thing is we actually furred out this wall. This is technically 8 inches off the container wall. We're creating a cavity here so that we can have additional foam behind the water lines so that they don't freeze. The final location of where this unit is going can get extremely cold with below freezing temperatures. And we don't want these PEX lines ever freezing inside the unit. Now, when it comes to the drain lines, we use black ABS pipe for all of our drains. Right here is an example. This is a 3-inch line. This would be our main sewage line. So typically, this is gonna go directly to our toilet. And from there, all of our other sewage lines will feed into this, and then it'll exit out the back of the container as a main connection point. Over here, we also have an example of one of the 1.5-inch lines. This is for all of the sinks, so the vanity sink and the kitchen sink. For the showers, we actually use something a little bit bigger. It's typically gonna be a 2-inch ABS drain line. Now, when it comes to how do you actually do this, we haven't gotten to that phase yet, so there's not too much I can reveal at this exact moment, but I do want to talk you through it. So essentially, all of your main fixtures are gonna have drain lines, right? We went over the different sizes here. This is the type that you can use. Now, how you run those through your container floors and out of your container can vary by the type of foundation that you're doing. For example, if you have a slab foundation, that means all of your plumbing is gonna have to exit out the back of the container because you aren't gonna be able to access underneath your container to make any connections after it's installed. Another way of doing it if you have a slab foundation is that all of these lines are already pre-ran in your slab, and they're gonna stub out in the exact locations where this container is gonna get placed, and you have holes pre-cut that are gonna receive those drain lines. Now, we've never done it that way. That is pretty technical, and you gotta make sure everything is just perfect. Most of the time what we do, because everything that we build is modular and it gets shipped across the country, we need all of our drain lines self-contained within the underside of the container and exiting and accessible on the exterior. It's for this reason that we have to get kind of creative with how we do some of our drainage. So specifically with our toilet. So right here, you can see it's a pretty big line. This is 3 inches, and the underside of a container is only 5.5 inches. This means that when we have our toilet seated on the floor, and then there's the flange of a 90 that's gonna lead to this, that drop can sometimes exceed the amount of space we have underneath the container. And it's for that reason that a lot of times we'll use a product called a toilevator. What a toilevator does is it's actually gonna sit under your actual toilet. It's gonna raise it an additional 3 inches, and it'll allow this whole system to then raise up 3 more inches and allow you to stay within that space underneath the container. Another challenge you may run into is the P-trap for your shower. Now there's some alternative slimline P-trap options, but the reality is you need to have one. In our instances, we need to keep it within the container subfloor. So what we'll usually do is actually create a subfloor on top of this container floor for our shower. It'll raise that shower, say, an additional 4 inches to maybe 7 inches, and it's gonna give us enough room for that drain line to drop, for us to have a P-trap, and for it to exit out the back of a container and still remain within the subfloor. Now, one more thing to talk about on the topic of plumbing is your water heater. So you have a few different options when it comes to the type of water heater that you're gonna choose. Now, these options will be affected by your power availability and your power sources on site. So we either use an electric tanked water heater, an electric on-demand water heater, or we'll use a propane on-demand water heater. So if you're in an off-grid application, using a propane on-demand water heater could be a great option. Because it takes a lot of energy to heat up water, propane is a great alternative when you're off the grid. If you do have access to power, then you have the option to do a tanked water heater, or you can go with an on-demand. They both are effective, but they use a different amount of power. A tanked water heater is typically gonna be 110 volt and not gonna consume a ton of amps. However, if you're going on demand, that thing may require 80 amps from your breaker panel, and it can consume over 10,000 watts. So it takes a ton of power. So if you have access to a lot of power, on-demand water heaters that are electric could be an excellent option. And if you don't, consider a tanked water heater. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video as we broke down how to do the plumbing inside of your container home. For those of you that are DIYers, I did put together a free workshop for you. It's linked in the description below. It's gonna go over some of the biggest secrets in container construction that we've learned the hard way. So I hope you have the opportunity to check it out, and I'll see you on the next video.